Students around the world are finishing their qualifications so they can get ahead in life and make their contribution. If you are studying, researching, or thinking about it, you will need practical tips, techniques, coaching, and support to help you get finished and be successful. I'm Peter Alkemer, the Student Success Coach, and welcome to the podcast. Each episode, I interview successful students and leaders in education so that you will learn everything you need right here. You will learn about writing, completing your thesis and other projects, planning, discipline, how to get more done, supervisors, getting published, getting finished, how to have the right discipline, and many other aspects of student life. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or any other podcast platform, please leave a rating and a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Either way, please get in touch and let us know what you think of the show and what you want to hear more of. Please always check the show notes for links to courses, material, and plenty more so that you can use what you've learned in each episode, take action, and achieve your student success. Please also join the Student Success Coach community in our exclusive members-only Facebook group where I post regularly and you can interact with fellow students just like yourself. Remember, you can't do this alone, so reach out, get involved, and take advantage. It's my commitment to your success. Now for this week's episode. Cara, welcome to the Student Success Coach podcast. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. You've been an active participant in a number of our webinars. I know you've been through some, wonderful academic milestones and also some personal milestones. So just great to see, that I think many of us have all had a tough couple of years and studies we've added to that, but you seem to have sort of made it through. And well done for that. So before we get into some of your tips and techniques for our listeners about academic success, and that's really what people want to hear, is how do they get through? So we need to inspire people and show them that it's possible. We're going to get into all of that, and I'm going to pick your brain and just make sure everyone's benefiting from your story. Just maybe give us a bit of an introduction. Tell us about yourself, what you've been studying, a bit of your academic and some of your personal journey as well so far.
Okay, great. Well, first off, thank you for having me on the the podcast. I really love the fact that you're able to reach so many students. So I'm really excited for what this is going to, lead to. So I actually matriculated not too long ago. So I don't really have too much experience. But I started my BAc, my undergrad in 2017 in biochem. And just completed my honors last year in pharmacology, and I'm doing my master's now in pharmacology. This is my first year, actually, 2021. So all it took, and that's kind of my academic background, but I want to start tutoring and mentoring and, just adding to my CV in any way I can, really.
And why do you want to do that, Cara? I mean, it's interesting to find students, and there are a number of them, and I guess myself included, but, we have a sense of wanting to give back. So, I mean, how, you, as you say, sort of, reasonably early in your journey, but you've done well so far. And do you think there's a gap? Do you think there's a need for students to get this kind of help that perhaps you and I are sort of so passionate about?
I honestly don't know where that comes from. I thought I was alone. So it's good to know that I'm not, but I think maybe as you were studying, there was just a lack of resources, even though the university does try and, account for that. But I mean, mentoring, I feel like you just go so much further with someone helping you along the way, and you can really avoid making unnecessary mistakes. And my thing is, because I've just recently, started studying and whatnot, I think there's a massive gap between high school and varsity. I mean, I really did struggle with that. My marks dropped quite a bit. So I'm actually quite surprised that I am where I am. But I think that support is also lacking quite a lot. I mean, you're basically spoon-fed and all of a sudden you're an adult, So I think that's where my need to help or want or desire to help comes from.
So, Cara, I mean, it's very interesting. You say we spoon fed at sort of primary and high school, I guess, and then we regurgitate lots of information. We're examined on our ability to repeat information. So we're fed information. We have to retain it, and then we have to repeat it, and then we're marked and assessed and pass or fail on that basis. But then you talked about a jump into varsity life, and I'm just really keen to understand that, because there'll be people listening that will be considering doing studies for the first time. So what do they need to be thinking about if their background is that sort of earlier stage of education, and how can they get ahead of not making those mistakes and have the right mindset as early on as possible?
So well, that was a lot of questions there, but anyway, okay, where do I even begin? I think, like I said, the whole mentoring thing, I think it's a revolutionary idea. If that sounds, I think that's a bit out there, but I mean, I really did need a lot of guidance in terms of, especially with science, navigating in science. That was quite interesting for me. No one in my family had done science before, and also with the spoon feeding thing, I must mention, I don't say it in like a bad way. I think some people might take offense. What I mean by that is, even in your undergrad, I was also, you're expected to learn this, exactly like this, and you're asked this, and you need to regurgitate the information. And also going into your postgrad studies, now you have to apply all of a sudden, and there was no intermediate. And there's no intermediate between high school and your undergrad. There's no intermediate between undergrad and your postgrad. So I think it's just that jump that people need help with. And if they don't have that, that intermediate bridging, then they struggle later on. I mean, you coach postgrad students about how to, write proposals and improve academic writing and so on. And the thing is that the reason why second, third year master students are not coping with this skill is because they didn't learn it in their honors or beginning of the masters. So I think it just improves academics overall, really, to bridge so
no, well done. Yeah, I think that's really good insights. And I suppose we're sort of changing or evolving in our approach to understanding the world around us. And eventually, as you say, by the time you get to postgrad, you should be very critical of information, how information or knowledge is created, and then be able to start contributing and creating to knowledge and doing research that actually extends our knowledge of how the world around us works. And if you don't consciously make that mindset, then you're going to get to that point. And I experienced it as well, and I sort of really had to adjust and really rethink or relearn or unlearn, and then relearn, how I viewed the world around me. And I was fortunate to have, supervisors and lecturers and support around me that helped me through that. But I think, as you said, there's, a lot of people that haven't made it. So was that your experience of varsity? Was it true that, there was a dropout rate, and, you saw people in your class that just weren't going to make it or couldn't retain the amount of information, or maybe they just chose the wrong degree? What was your experience of that sort of funnel narrowing as you got further and further along?
Oh my word. I mean, let me tell you, you go to varsity and you have so many stories and you meet so many people. And I mean, I met vet students, I met medical students, I met, students that wanted to do chemistry, physics, biology. We were all just together. And I mean, the one example, I had a friend who started out doing a BSc, then she switched over to sports science, then she went over to physiotherapy, and now she's doing physio. Another one of my friends, she did the extended program and she failed a few modules. She was really struggling with chemistry. I understand it's really difficult. Chemistry is very tough, especially in varsity. And I think she finished last year. So she started before me and she's finishing after me. Not many people finish on time. Some people change degrees. I had another friend, she started in BCom, hated it, went to BSc. finished last year and she wants to go overseas and study to be a vet. So it's all these different people that have all these different journeys and pathways. So it's quite interesting, I must say.
I mean, I interviewed somebody, I think he's in his late 50s, very successful businessman. He was on the podcast recently. He actually managed to study at Oxford. He did a diploma in business strategy, and I mean, that's just a really fascinating episode to listen to. But he sort of indicated that he only really found out what he was passionate about and what he actually wanted to spend more and more time studying in his 40s. You know, he said he also jumped around. He did accounting. He did a couple of other things, and you know, he saw that as a positive. He was sort of richer, felt richer, and able to make a broader contribution because of that. So, you know, I guess I did engineering, and I sort of ended up in IT, and now I'm coaching students. And you know, we all have sort of diverse and different pathways. Is there anything that stands out for you in your experience, you know, in your interaction with those friends that you mentioned, that perhaps you think could help other people listening today? You know, in terms of approaching, you know, those types of decisions and making the changes they need to?
Well, it's actually quite funny that you're asking, because one of my friends that I went to high school with, her brother is now in matric this year, and he is really into science or biology, and obviously loving what I do. I just want to jump at any opportunity to convince someone to do science because I love it so much. So I actually, this past Saturday, I helped him through, you know, these are the options how to get into medicine, but you have to do this first, and then this, and then this. And I think now that I'm thinking about it a bit, I think no matter what you choose at the end of the day, there may not be a shortcut to where you want to go. Like I said, my friends had to go quite a long route to get to where they needed to be, maybe do another degree or start with in another faculty completely, or take a gap year. But whatever is meant to be is meant to be, I suppose. But I think some things can be taught, or, you know, some lessons can maybe shorten or make your journey a bit easier. But I think if you're meant to take a longer journey, then you're meant to take a longer journey. So it's two sides to that, I think.
Interesting. And Cara, thank you. I know you're very active in our members only Facebook group, where we, you know, provide a safe space for people to explore these ideas and, you know, get the support that they need. And through our mentorship program, I know we've got 1 or 2 partnerships up and running where, you know, you can help people with these ideas, and people can reach out and get the support that they need. So I think we just need to do more of this. And it's always a case of facilitating a person's own journey and asking the questions that will, you know, lead to that self-discovery of what really sort of works, you know, for them. I think, you know, a generational issue, you know, previously might have been just expectations from parents and, you know, certain types of degrees that you have to go into, or careers. I must say I don't hear too much of that. I think that the world has really changed, and that there is such just a rich variety of things that you can do. I think people generally are encouraged to just try lots of different things, take a break if they can, travel the world, and open their minds significantly. And we've heard of successful businessmen, Elon Musk and others, saying, you know, they don't really even value the core qualification that much. It's great if you've got these specific skills, but it's also ultimately the value you can provide to businesses, your role and contribution in society, etc.
Oh no, I agree with that as well. I mean, if I think about, like I said, I was one of the first people in my family to want to pursue science. I mean, I'm the first one to do a master's as well. So that's quite interesting. I mean, my dad went to college. My mom went to college. My dad is like qualified mechanic. My mom is like a debtor kind of phone person thing. So it's like they're completely different backgrounds. They're really good at what they do in their own right, but pressure, you should do this, you should do that. It was a matter of, you really enjoy this, let's take the next step and let's see if you like it. Or there was no negotiation about going to varsity, though. That was just a given, because you kind of need that basis now. I think if you don't have that degree,
absolutely. And well done to them on doing such a good job and helping you through and sort of get so well grounded in your studies. Cara, then I mean, just maybe your experience of maybe undergrad and postgraduate studies. What are maybe some of the top core skills, that people need to develop to be good at that level of academic study?
So you're pretty much asking me what I did right, I suppose.
Yep.
That's actually what you're asking. You know what? That's a really interesting question, because it's different for everyone, because what worked for me is not going to work for you. And I mean, I even told this one student that I'm mentoring, I mean, I did this, and it worked for me, but maybe tweak it, maybe it will set off another idea in your head on what you can do. And I'm constantly reassessing how I can improve things if I see myself slacking. But I think my main philosophy was instilled in me by my dad, which was do your best at everything, because you can't do better than your best. But I think that's something great to live by, especially, there's a lot of comparison in today's, generation, where you just want to compare yourself to everyone, and that can be really, really dangerous to your self-esteem and to your journey, I suppose. I mean, you don't need to have a defined timeline. You get what I'm saying? So, I mean, just taking that into consideration. Also, I mean, I think what's quite important when you're studying and you want to study long term is you can't let your emotions get the better of you. And I'm pretty sure you know this, because you kind of had to balance work and life and everything. And I'm not quite there. I at least don't have as many responsibilities as you do. But I mean, everyone doesn't feel like studying, or doesn't feel like doing that, or hates this aspect of their job, or this aspect of a module, or this aspect of their dissertation, or project, or whatnot. So
I mean, I think your advice then is for people to focus on their strengths and where they feel more naturally drawn to spend more effort, rather than follow some kind of formula for what other people have done to be successful. I think that's
there's no
absolutely
formula.
true. Yeah. And I think university and sort of studying after school is an environment within which you should be able to start to develop your own expression and understanding of the world, and that's going to come through a unique experience. And we don't want a stereotypical cookie cutter model of graduates and postgraduates, because the only way we'll solve the world's big problems, I think, is if we allow that individuality to come through in our research and our understanding of the world. Yeah, Cara, thank you. That's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, just now, so you've got your BSc, you've done your honors, you're doing your masters, and what are your thoughts on how university then, and perhaps in your own experience or other people's experience, how do you then link and bridge into the world of work and sort of after varsity and the next steps of now sort of spreading your wings, I suppose, if you could call it, into the worldwide, out there?
That's a tough one, because I'm still figuring that out myself. I mean, the thing is, specifically with science, I mean, what I've found is probably the most useful piece of information that I can give someone that wants to pursue a BSc or science as a whole. Maybe it expands to other qualifications, but you have to take it step by step. I mean, I was in high school, and I wanted to know what was happening in 10 years' time. I was 18. I mean, I had to relax a bit and actually take a step back and realize that the next step is BSc. Okay, we're going to do as well as we can. Then in my third year, it's like, okay, what is the next step? Okay, honors. We're going to do the best that we can. Then you meet people that are obviously, senior to you, and senior students, and you get advice. You ask questions the whole time. You seek their guidance and their stories and learn from their mistakes. And that's just how you navigate throughout that whole academic journey. But in terms of the workplace, I mean, I'm hoping to do my PhD, and I'd love to do it overseas as well. So that's a big enough obstacle, or not obstacle, but it's quite a massive thing to comprehend right now. So past that, I'm not thinking that far ahead.
Mm.
But I'm trying to increase my number of connections and just trying to do my research and trying to expand on whatever knowledge I have. That's what I'm busy with doing now, trying to do.
Okay. So I mean, it's in the back of your mind. It's something that you'll put more effort into at some stage when it's more appropriate for you to do that. But the next few years, certainly, masters, PhD, and getting through those. It's interesting that you use the phrase step by step, because I actually just recently launched a course called the 6 Step to Student Success, and that was sort of born out of the need to really give people a roadmap. To just lay the steps out. And I sort of put 6 steps together that I thought from start to finish really gives you the big building blocks or the big stepping stones that you need to go through in a sort of research-based study. And I think people like to approach, problems or barriers or obstacles or big milestones in their lives on that basis. It's too big to think about that massive milestone. But if you give me a roadmap that says do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, you can get your head around each of those individual steps, and you can focus in on those, take that step, reassess, take the next step, reassess, take the next step. So yeah, I'm glad you sort of use that language.
I agree. I mean, that was the advice that was given to me in my undergrad, because I kind of got to the point where I thought, okay, if I'm going to start focusing too much on way in the future, I'm not going to, first of all, live in the present, and second of all, actually excel at what I'm doing because I'm so focused on the future, but it's not there yet. And you just have to pace yourself. You can't put that much pressure on yourself, especially if you're in your 20s, early 20s. You shouldn't be putting that much pressure.
Yeah, I mean, in my 4th year of engineering, even I started full-time employment on the 1st of November of my 4th year. So I hadn't even graduated. I think I was still even writing or finishing off our, final year projects. We'd written exams in the middle of the year.
Oh, wow.
But, looking back, I wonder whether maybe I should have just taken a year off, or maybe take another 6 months. When everybody was going off on their sort of big, holidays at the end of 4th year, I was full-time employed from the 1st of November in my 4th year of engineering, and suddenly it's 25 years later, and I sort of look back, and I guess my advice would be, if you can do it, just take 6 months off, just enjoy it. You're not going to have that time again. The work will be there if you've got a lot of contribution to make and you've done reasonably well in your studies. The opportunities will be there for you. Yeah, fantastic. Cara, and then so just maybe let's just talk a little bit more specifically about your field, and you going into a master's, and I mean, so that's going to be a year, and then you're sort of thinking about your PhD, possibly overseas, etc. Are you kind of thinking about any sort of specific topic, or is there some issue that you're trying to solve that you'd like to put your efforts into through a PhD? And is that something that you're also keeping in the back of your mind and will sort of get to when you arrive at that point?
Well, with my master's, so it's actually 2 years. It's not one.
Okay.
So it's a lot longer. I mean, my honors was just 1 year as well. So it's definitely going to be more in depth. But in my honors, we kind of were given topics, so we didn't really have as much flexibility as we wanted. So my supervisor that I chose, I actually fell into my topic. It was an accident. So it was quite funny because I was sick for a week and I was off, and that was kind of the week that everyone was talking to supervisors, and there was only 2 people left, and I chose, or it kind of chose me. So but I loved it. It was really great. So my research was on triple negative breast cancer. Okay,
wow.
It's basically where you construct these, how would I describe it? You basically take, trying to describe it now is going to be very interesting because now I'm talking to people that haven't heard of these concepts before. But anyway, so it's basically like an aggregate of cells, and we test the efficacy of a drug called doxorubicin. I'm sure some people have heard of it. It's called the Red Devil, and it's a chemotherapy drug. It's quite common. and there's a lot of resistance surrounding it. So we're just testing why there's resistance. You know, the cell-to-cell interactions are quite tight, or, you know, it just gets pushed out of the cell. And that's sort of the research that I was doing. And I want to extrapolate on that, or, you know, expand on it in my master's. With my PhD, if I do change institutions, so if I do go overseas, then it depends on what they offer and what programs or what focus areas they have. But I mean, cancer as a whole is a huge question mark at the moment. So there's a lot of research out there, but there's even more questions. So I think it's quite a good field to explore. And that's kind of where I'm heading.
No, that's so interesting, Cara. And I mean, yeah, I mean, look, we all know somebody or family or you know, that cancer experience, and I mean, I guess it's sort of now also COVID and all these other things that are so pervasive in our lives that we're all sort of starting to get to grips with them. So, you know, a lot of the advice I give, you know, students going into masters or PhD is also that, and you fell in your topic, and maybe that's opportunistic, you know, and there could be some great things that come out of it, or you find it's, you know, it doesn't grab you and it's not going to keep your interest for a whole PhD, but you could really set yourself up for, you know, a more extensive study using your masters as a bit of a platform to, you know, develop some initial thinking, you know, get to grips with the literature, you know, get some initial results from a study, etc. And if you've got a clear plan that you do want to get to a PhD stage, and of course, if you find somewhere that you can kind of narrow in on what you want to do, then your master's is fantastic groundwork to get into that PhD. Look, and I'm not a good example. I did my master's straight after I graduated, and I did it on quantitative modeling of composite materials. And 20 years later, I did my PhD on agile software engineering. So the two were completely different.
Yeah.
But following your path, you know, there is a lot to be said for you keep building up in an area and then starting to narrow down, and that's where you'll then be able to find the gap in the literature and be able to make a significant contribution.
Well, I mean, with what I've learned from a few senior students is that with what we are expected to do in our masters is more so gain techniques, and I mean, because it's lab work that we're essentially doing, and I mean, it's a lot more difficult than it sounds. I didn't realize I actually started, you know, doing my own research last year. So it's getting to grips with the different techniques. I mean, you can do microscopy, you can do LCMS, you can do flow cytometry, you can do, you know, protein-based studies. There's quite a lot of skills that you can, cell culture, that's my main one. I can't believe I actually forgot that. There's a lot of techniques that you can do. And I mean, your master's is kind of a way of gaining skills that you think prospective, you know, employees would want, or, you know, just skills that are not so common. It just depends on what you want to specialize in. So it's not so much the project, it's more so the technique is the way I understand things. So that's the approach I'm taking.
Fantastic, Cara. I mean, I think that's going to be absolutely, you know, fascinating. And yeah, maybe let's just talk about, you know, your institute. You're at Pretoria, hey, Pretoria University.
Yeah.
So, I mean, quite a vibrant. We've got a lot of Pretoria students on the webinars every week, which is fantastic. My experience is obviously at the Wits University, and just those people that are not from South Africa listening today, Johannesburg and Pretoria are quite close, two large cities in the north of South Africa in a region called Gauteng. Yeah, I guess always a healthy rivalry between the two universities, but both absolutely outstanding institutions. And you've enjoyed it there, Cara?
Oh, I have, of course. I mean, I'm doing my third degree at the same university. I mean, that says something. I don't know. I love it. I love the people there. There's so much help, so many resources. It's just, I don't know, the environment's just great. I love it. So I don't regret it at all.
That's fantastic. Oh, it's wonderful to see someone that's sort of so inspired and motivated to keep studying. And developing yourself and, preparing your skills for the future. That's absolutely fantastic. Cara, okay, then I just got maybe one or two questions, and thank you. It's been just lovely chatting and catching up. Maybe just looking back, so somebody that's sort of, getting into BSc or an undergraduate degree, what sort of advice would you have for them? And perhaps let's just sort of make it as practical as possible. Is there some practical things that you did, and it obviously won't work for everybody, but that really stood out for yourself specifically, that just made a big difference? And a simple example that I teach in my step-by-step course is to set up that weekly supervisor status report. And that's just a simple practical step that just creates a rhythm of progress and focus. But maybe you developed other techniques that you could share with people listening today.
Well, I mean, actually, it's funny you mentioned that as well, because I want to actually start doing that in my master's, having weekly checks with my supervisor. So I actually want to use that idea of yours. But in terms of undergrad studies, if I have to think back on what I would advise a BSc student, well, first of all, I mean, I'm not so sure if you've heard of the stigma around BSc, that most students want to do medicine or vet, and that's why they do a BSc, and no one really wants to do a BSc. That was my experience in first year, and it was actually quite sad because I was there because I wanted to do BSc. But the thing is that I think everyone thinks of medicine, or not medicine, but science, and they think of, doctor or vet, and they don't think of the BSc. I mean, the people that are doing all this research on COVID and the vaccines, they're scientists, I mean, yeah, some of them are doctors and they went back into research, but the majority of them are people like us, So I think people don't realize that science is quite diverse, and there's, I don't know, even in high school, thinking back, there was no mention of this is the possible opportunities you have. So I always think that's very sad. So I always try to advocate for BSc because there's so much, so many things you can do. You can do zoology, you can do entomology, you can do biochemistry, genetics, chemistry, all these different things. And I think that it just makes me very sad because it's been my whole life and I've loved it. That's
okay.
Just that realization. But then going back to actually practical aspects on advice with the BSc, don't underestimate it. Okay. Because it's not medicine. It's tough. It's very, very tough. Like I said, I've had friends that failed and they really have been struggling and they just can't cope with the workload. It's really, really rough. So don't think now that you're out of high school, it's, all fun and games. You have to work very, very hard.
So when you say they couldn't cope with the workload, was that the sheer volume of how much you need to get through and the amount of lectures and assignments and the scope of the topic that you'll then be examined on, etc., or is it the complexity of the topic that people just can't get to grips with it? I mean, I'm just trying to get an understanding of whether it's more of a personal application to setting more time aside and being more disciplined, or whether there's an intuition to the area and to the field that you either do or you don't have.
I think it's a bit of both. It depends on the module. I mean, chemistry, for example, is exactly that. You have to have that, math brain. You have to have that way of thinking to really understand the problems and calculate what you're required to calculate. But then other modules, it's a case of everything builds on each other. So if you don't understand the basis and you don't work hard from the beginning and they just continue without you, and then you don't have the basis, so you don't understand what's going on, and you don't cope in that way because you don't start early enough. I mean, towards the end of my degree, I kind of perfected that way I went about each new module. And I said to myself that I'll give myself maybe 2 weeks to, how can I say, get familiar with the module, because you have to get used to the lecturers. They they lecture in a certain way. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. Some of them really try to trick you. Some of them really provide nice slides and the layout's great, and little things like that do influence how you perceive a module and whether you are, go into it wholeheartedly or not. And also the schedules, what is expected of you from the practicals. We had a lot of lab practicals. So just assessing the module, see what is expected of you, and then come up with the routine based on that. But you need to give yourself a limit and get to, start that routine as soon as possible to not get behind. That's how I felt.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So what I got from you there was, once you get behind, it's very difficult to catch up because new information is always being added and it's building on previous principles. So if you can get to grips with your module almost right at the beginning and be as proactive as possible, then you're doing your best to stay ahead. And it's both in terms of being organized and knowing when and where your lab sessions and lectures are, etc., but also then just immersing yourself, in that textbook and reading a couple of chapters or sections ahead, just, which I think applies to many other areas in life, is if you're going into something, then grab it with both hands, be intentional about getting ahead as quickly as you possibly can, and you'll be successful.
No, of course. But I mean, I think procrastination was my problem. So I think procrastination is quite an interesting one to work around. So that's where the routine comes, and then you can't have a routine if you don't know what's expected of you and it's like you said, just getting organized essentially.
Yeah. And Cara, I mean, just to finish off with, you reminded me when you mentioned procrastination, is that we had the webinar at the end of last year with Dr. Jeff, who's got 2 PhDs. And then I sort of asked everyone on the live chat to share, anything that they were struggling with at the moment. And I remember that you put up on the chat there that you had exams the following week, but you were just procrastinating. You just couldn't sit down and get through the 2 or 3 hours of study that you needed to. And I asked Dr. Jeff to coach you a little bit. And then I said, well, I'm going to try and coach you a little bit. And we talked about burning your boats, which was really just a commit to everyone on the webinar, if you were going to be able to do a couple of hours study, but then to make a public declaration on the chat group that I will do 2 hours of study before 6 o'clock this evening, whatever. And you did that. And then you shared with us in the group later on, or the following day, I can't remember, that because you'd burnt your boats, you made that commitment, you overcame your procrastination, and you got those hours of studying done. So maybe just tell us that story from your perspective.
So I actually never heard of the concept burn your boats until your webinar, and even in your course, because I actually did the course as well. So I had the in-depth explanation of that. And I thought it was really interesting because, I mean, if you think about it, being held accountable, what actually drives you to carrying out that task? Let's be honest, it's because you don't want to come back to this person and say, oh, I didn't do it. You want to be able to come back and say, yes, I did it, So I think that's the power behind Burn Your Boats. And I really love that. And that's how I thought. And then I figured I really want to come back and say that I was able to do it. So then I guess the fear of not saying I didn't complete the task outweighed my procrastination. So that's kind of it. It's sad to say, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
And not going to, sugarcoat it. That's what happened, and it worked. And I don't think anything's wrong with that because I still graduated with my distinction. So however I got there, it's okay.
Absolutely. Cara, it's human nature. And, that's something I've written about and, taught and coached students quite passionately about, because I find it works in my own life to overcome my own procrastination and sort of inability sometimes to just sit down and get something done. So I'll commit to somebody, I'm going to get it done. And that then forces me back into taking the steps to get to that, to meeting that commitment. And absolutely, as you say, whatever it takes to get you through. There are these techniques and things, and people don't have to struggle on their own, get the coaching and the support, and people who are able to come up with these unique ways of overcoming those challenges. And obviously not everything works for everybody else, but I was just so thrilled that it worked for you at that point when you needed it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that
Yeah.
you would have done very well and got your distinction anyway. But it was just fantastic to see a real-time practical application of that principle, and you then completing your exams the following week. But I think with the sort of clear conscience of having overcome that procrastination and being able to do as much as you possibly could to prepare for the exams.
Well, I mean, I think the burn your boats is so powerful, even with the I will statement. I mean, I don't know, that webinar just changed my way of thinking, So, I mean, the student I'm mentoring, I even used your principles, and I told her, give me I will statements and, display them where you are working and studying. And also the burn your boats. I mean, we are meeting on Friday, so we're having another meeting about, just catching up. And more so, I want her to tell me, I'm really hoping that she did everything that she said she wanted to do this week. And even if she didn't, and she tried her best, and she, was able to get through a lot of the content, at least she, gave it her all. But I mean, I think that's, being held accountable. I think it's definitely hit her. I mean, she's told me a few times already, so it's quite an interesting concept. I'm excited to use it in the future as well.
Fantastic, Cara. It's great to see that you learned something, you applied it, and now you're teaching somebody else, and you learn more by teaching other people and seeing their journey than you sort of do by just hearing it for the first time and trying to put it in practice yourself. So, Cara, thank you. I mean, it's just been such an inspirational chat, and good to put a face to the name that always pops up on the webinar, and the experience that we had through your procrastination. And I wish you absolutely everything the best for your masters. Any last thoughts or sort of words of wisdom for people out there listening in today?
I think the last thing that I can probably think of is, if you think you can do something, or if you think you can't do something, you're right. So it's up to you which one you believe. It's all about your mindset. And I think that's probably the way to success, having the right mindset. I
love that, Cara. It's a perfect note to end this episode. So to everybody listening, hope you really got something out of it today. I think Cara shared a lot of her own experience and passed on some, practical advice about how you can also just be successful in your studies. And wonderful to end off on that brilliant quote that, as Cara said, if you think you can do something, or you think you can't, you're probably right. So to everybody listening out there today, I hope wherever you are in your studies, I hope that you believe and think with every passion that you possibly can, that you can do it, you can be successful, and you will get there. Cara is an example, like many others that we've had on the podcast. So Cara, good luck. Look forward to seeing you in a future webinar, and good luck with the person that you're mentoring. I hope that session goes well this week, and that each and every week just gets better and better for them, and that you'll play an absolutely pivotal role in getting them successfully through the study. So well done, and keep that up. We need more.
Thank you. Thanks.
Like
I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see, how this is going to unfold. I can't wait till she graduates, and it's just going to be amazing. I can't wait.
It's very satisfying. Well done, Cara. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time today on the episode, and good luck with the studies. We'll chat soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.